Hello, dear friend, and welcome to the Overachievers Club. That's right, this place where we get bogged down by perfectionism, conflicting demands, and of course, the pressure to prove ourselves again and again. In this conversation, we are going to talk about what it looks like to slow down a little bit, quiet that inner critic whose voice is always so loud, and help build small habits that actually are going to help you breathe a little bit easier, even if you don't realize you're not breathing so well right now. We're also going to talk about how grace, curiosity, and a clear sense of what matters most can change the way you show up in your work, your relationships, and of course, your day-to-day life. If you've been feeling a bit stretched thin, stuck in your own head, or just overwhelmed by everything going on right now, this is a place for you to come, relax, and just enjoy the beauty of God's goodness as we talk about our own struggles. You guys are going to love my guest, Allie, this week, so stick around. Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to the Persistence in Prayer podcast hosted by Catholic mindset coach, wife, mother, educator, and speaker, Kylie Hine. Kylie is passionate about helping you deepen your relationship with God through the power of prayer. This podcast is a space for high achievers who want to do it all, but also want to prioritize their spiritual life and grow in faith. Join us as we explore the beauty of persistence in prayer and the transformative impact it can have on our lives. Get ready to discover practical tips, insights, and inspiration to help you develop a daily prayer practice and cultivate a deeper sense of trust in God's plan for your life. Let's journey together towards a more fulfilled and faithful life as we invite the Holy Spirit in. Let's begin. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. My guest today is Allison Krug, a wife, mother of two, epidemiologist, and certified performance coach. Allison combines her background in science with a deep understanding of human behavior to help high achievers break free from patterns of striving, perfectionism, and performance so they can live with greater freedom, purpose, and peace. And Allie is such a joy and a wealth of wisdom from the conversation that I have had with her thus far. So, Allie, I'm so excited to have you here.
Well, I'm thankful to be here too. I feel very insufficient to the task, and that's a true performance-minded person statement, isn't it? Because you have had such incredible guests on. I've really enjoyed listening to those in your pod, and you have offered to women out there, high-achieving women out there, people who live very busy lives, such wisdom to help them navigate all of the questions that are presented to them, right? Should they say yes? Should they say no? And having that discernment. So thank you for inviting me.
Oh, thank you. And I know this is going to be fun because we've already been laughing about pronunciation of names.
And I may not even know how to say my own last name.
We're going with Krug today.
As far as I know, yes.
Allie, do you just want to give us a little bit of background on the type of coaching that you do and how you got into this work, or maybe even a little bit about your family?
Yeah, sure. When you get to be my age, I'm 55. I feel like that could be an hour-long question right there. I am a mother first and a spouse, and I am a coach now because I wanted to become a better mother and spouse. I did not go into this planning to have a business. I was just thinking about that the other day. Once I started coach training, it was never a question that I would do it for other people, but it was never my intent to have a business per se. I wanted to be of service, and I wanted to be sure that people who needed this kind of support and a safe space to have a non-judgmental conversation would be able to access it. So from the very beginning, I've pledged to offer my services basically as pay what you can, but I do offer executive level coaching. And obviously, if you're working with corporate clients, that's more expensive typically. But I really enjoy working with all high performers, people from all walks of life. Whoever the Lord sends to me is who I work with. I have always had, you mentioned I'm an epidemiologist, I've always had a business as a mother. And so I think that's something that maybe other mothers, especially younger mothers today, might be curious about is how do you balance those things? I know that you're doing that too. But my business model has always been word of mouth. And basically, the Lord sends me who I should work with and sends me the kinds of projects that I should work with and offers me the grace to be able to navigate all of the yeses involved in carrying out those projects. So I have a nap time business model for my epidemiology work. And that has always been the model, like get it done in 2 to 3 hours or so. And in my coaching practice, now that my children are 18 and 21, I organize it around their lives still. I want to be present in their lives, and they are my priority. And you asked about my family. And growing up, I come from New Jersey. I was born in California, but I spent most of my time in New Jersey. I grew up around horses, and that's a big part of my life, a big, big joy in my life. I will relate all things to horses and horse behavior if I can, including family life, raising young people, and being the barn manager here. It just keeps me laughing. I think humor is an important component of parenting, very important to me. And I think that brings you pretty much up to speed of where I am. I've been an epidemiologist for 25 years. I've been married for 25 years. I've been a coach for 3 years. And my older son is why I'm a coach, because I work with really interesting, intelligent, sensitive people who don't always work well within systems. And he really had a difficult time in school, not because he doesn't like learning. In fact, he loves learning so much that school was a major problem for him, because school often dictates how you learn and what you learn. And for autodidacts, people who love learning and teaching themselves, that can be a major challenge. So by the time we finally got to the end of high school, and we had already moved around the world as a military family, it just got really tough during the pandemic to see it all the way through across the finish line. And we were at loggerheads. It just wasn't working well anymore. We had really worked very hard to find lots of solutions for him to be able to continue his learning process, how he appreciates learning, and the things he likes to invest himself in, such as physics and math, while navigating the public school system and the military school system. But by the time we moved back during the pandemic and people were using masks and social interactions were very different, and there were a lot of rules, which is not so great for people in my family. We tend to be rather disruptive. It's interesting. I was going to tell you that I grew up with a lot of rules and being very rule sensitive. And I think that has caused me to be very rule questioning now as an adult. So that's a kind of interesting sidebar, maybe, because I tend to bend and question rules all the time. But how does that relate to my faith life, which is an interesting open question for me to consider. But anyway, that was a odd conversational cul-de-sac. Sorry about that, Kylie.
That's okay. You are an epidemiologist. I'm not sure everyone listening knows what that is. Can you just explain what that means?
Yeah, sure. No one knew what it was really until the pandemic. People thought I was like a dermatologist, the epidermis, or an entomologist, a bug scientist. An epidemiologist is someone who studies disease in populations. And I took that skill set. Most people go into public health with it. To do foodborne outbreaks might be one really solid example. The church picnic. Was it the tuna salad or was it the potato salad? What was it that caused everyone to be sick? Those are the tools. But when you expand the scope of those tools to diseases in populations, you can apply them in many different ways. And I liked applying it to quality improvement in managed care and getting people in for the kinds of health services, preventive health services that they really needed to have, whether it was flu shots or mammograms or prenatal care, and understanding who wasn't coming in and why. So barrier analysis, and then doing an intervention and then testing it again to see if we were better stewards of our resources in getting people into the health services that they really need. So that's what an epidemiologist can do in either the public sector or the private sector. I kind of covered both.
So you're telling us that you're just really, really smart.
No. In fact, I was very poor at math. Really, I remember crying in middle school about algebra. And then by high school, pre-calc was a challenge. And then I got into college and I went to UVA, and I remember sitting in the front row. I always sat in the front row because I have red hair, and I didn't want people to see me turning red because I ask a lot of questions, which is maybe the one through line through coaching too. But I didn't want people to see me turning red. So I sat in the front row so I could ask all my questions. And I asked a really dumb question in calculus. I said, what is that big S on the board? Why do they keep drawing this big S on the board? And the person next to me was like, that's an integral. Like, that is, you. Why are you here if you don't know what that is? I'm thinking that's a good question. But Krugs don't quit is our family motto. So for better or worse, I don't quit on anything. And I should have taken my butt out of that calculus class. But no, I tanked my GPA in my first year with that and another class I shouldn't have been in, because I loved biology and I got a nice 5 on my AP. And so, of course, I wanted 400 level virology. That sounded really interesting. Also not a good idea. And I didn't quit either. So no, I think what's interesting in your question is the way we see ourselves and how that can change over time. Self-concept as a learner is so important, and self-concept in coaching, how we see ourselves, our beliefs about ourselves, right? And how that shapes what we think is possible is, I think, one of the most substantial aspects of what we do as coaches is questioning these beliefs.
Yeah. And I love that you were that person that asked questions because I was not. I was the person who was like, I'm not going to ask a question because I don't want to sound dumb. I'm going to figure it out later on my own. But I love the people in class who would ask all the questions because it's like, "Yes, thank you. Thank you for
Right.
asking the question." And I ended up in calculus. I actually have a bachelor's in mathematics, not because
Oh,
I
wow.
thought I was going into mathematics, but because my testing, you know how you take the placement exam to see
Yes.
what math class you should be in? They put me in calculus, and I was like, "I didn't even take a math class my senior year. I don't really think I should be in here." And I was, I think, the only girl. There might have been one other, but I was like the only girl in the class. I also sat in the front row, but mainly so I didn't have to talk to people because I was like, I don't know anybody here and I don't know what I'm doing. Everyone, I felt like they knew, it just seemed like they knew everything more or better than I did. And then next semester, I found myself in Calc 2, and little by little, I ended up as a math major. So it's fascinating how, just like you said, the way that we perceive ourselves. I was in a place where I could excel, but I was comparing myself to everyone else around me and I just felt dumb, even though I was fully capable.
How interesting. Did you like math in grade school and high school?
I did. I really enjoyed it, but I just never saw myself as, I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I went to college. I actually was looking into graphic design, which was crazy because in high school, I felt like I was always taking all the extra math and science classes to keep my GPA higher because at our school, math and science classes were weighted. And so that was really important to me. Whereas an art class that maybe would have been fun, there was no room for that in my schedule, even though I really enjoyed it.
How interesting. You and I both share that right and left brain. I thought I was going to school to be a medical artist. So I was a biology and art double major. And they were far apart on the campus. And I was really having trouble getting from the lab to the art studio. I was booking it on my bike to
Yeah.
make it over there. And I'm like, okay, the way they designed this campus means that most people don't try to do this. So that's really cool that you had both of those loves going on at the same time, that creative side and then that really logical side.
Yes. And I think I strayed away from some of those things because math came more naturally to me. Whereas something like writing, which is more of the creative brain, was very challenging. I remember in high school, I would put it off till the very last minute and then I would cry my way through it. I don't know how I would have survived without my mother, senior English, those types of things. But I think it was I never gave myself enough time to struggle through it. And so my sophomore year of college, I had a professor and he asked me to tutor in the writing center. And I was like, are you sure you have the right person? I don't know. I don't know what you mean. But I was in an honors course. And so all we did was we read books and we wrote papers. I mean, that was essentially it. And he saw something in my writing. It was like, I think you should work in the writing center. And that triggered something in my brain that was like, okay, maybe I'm not a terrible writer. Maybe I just need to give myself more time to fail and get better at it. And I think I just expected it to come naturally, whereas math came more naturally because I practiced it more. I didn't take a lot of extra writing classes. I didn't challenge myself in that way. And so it was just kind of fascinating. It was through that I was like, okay, I can learn how to write. I just need to give myself more time.
That's so wonderful that you had that feedback and that insight at that time to realize that there is something there and that the struggle is worth it. In fact, the struggle is part of the process,
Hmm.
which in some ways was different for you because you said math came easily for you.
Yes. Not that it was always easy by any means. It wasn't. I would never take a differential equations class again in my life if I could. I will avoid it at all costs. It was hard. But I'm someone who, again, it's the way our brain is the both ands. And I
Mhm.
love to hear more of your experience on this. Part of me is like, wow, I like challenges. I like to do hard things, right? I'm very competitive. But also, I hate doing hard things because I hate failing.
Yeah. I mean, I am a very performance oriented person. I think when we were first talking, I was sharing with you, like, my brain is very conditional. If X, then Y. Like, you
Yes.
get to go to the bathroom if you empty the dishwasher. Measurement has always been a part of my life. I love experiments. I once collected poop from my horses so that I could test two different wormers. So I love real world experimentation. I had poops in plastic bags in my living room when I was growing up, all lined up. I remember that very clearly. Was wondering now what my parents thought about that, but you had to send them off to see if ivermectin worked better than the other one. And It did, actually. So it was kind of interesting when ivermectin came back into the news, like full
Mhm.
steam during the pandemic. I'm like, I know what that is. But yeah, measurement is always there, and we can fall into the trap of measuring ourselves. And yes, I think that's important. It's important to hold ourselves accountable. But at the same time, what I have learned, part of my story that I didn't mention yet, is I spent about half my life as a Protestant and now half my life as a Catholic. And what I've experienced in as a person practicing the Catholic faith is there is so much less, at least from my perspective, my own experience, so much less judgment and so much more grace around the spiritual journey and spiritual growth. So I think my early days were very much oriented around comparison and right and wrong and black and white thinking. And of course, yes, there's that. Sin is easy to
Mhm.
identify, but there's also the notion that sometimes gets lost is that the spiritual life is a journey, it's a process, and struggle is there as part of it. And I don't even know how you would measure spiritual growth on any kind of metric that you and I might devise, being people who appreciate metrics and math and progress measures. It's a very interesting question, isn't it?
Yes. And it's actually, I'm so glad that you said that. How do you measure spiritual growth? Because it is challenging. It's not the same kind of thing where it's like, I accomplished this and now it's done. So even people who have had mystical experiences, for example, it doesn't mean that they're automatic saints or they're holy. Those things can happen to people who are very much in a state of sin. For example, if we look at St. Augustine, he had this big revelation, but had he just stopped there and not followed what the Lord called him to do afterward, he still would have been in this very sinful state. But there are ways that we can, just like we would through coaching, we can give measurable goals. We just have to get a little more creative with it. So, for example, maybe I'm measuring my patience. And so all I do is I just look at putting my kids to bed each night. Did I raise my voice to them during bedtime? And maybe I just track that for a while. Just one specific small thing where we can just look for growth in a particular virtue. Or how many judgmental thoughts did I have about my husband? How many times did I try to blame him today for something that went on? Right? But we just have to narrow it down to something really, really small because the spiritual life is so big and vast. And we just have to shrink in and narrow in on one kind of specific place. And that's why I think the examen of St. Ignatius of Loyola is so huge. St. Teresa of Avila always says that the doorway to the interior castle is through prayer and reflection. And so, just like a scientist reflects on, like, what are the results of this experiment that I did? What patterns am I noticing? That's what the daily examen is. It's looking at what happened during my day, overall helicopter view. What went well today? What didn't go well? Where did I fall? Okay, I'm going to try to work on that tomorrow. I'm going to adjust something small, like one variable for a week and see how something is shifted. But it's kind of
Yes.
like we have to zoom in a little bit.
Yes. I love how you brought that to the virtues. And in my own coaching practice, I have shifted from values to virtues. This is at least the way I think about it. Values are very aspirational, and I think they have their place, and I've done them with my own family. But the virtues are like, what are you doing every day? What are you actually doing? And then when I discovered Father Mike Schmitz's book, Unshakable,
Mhm.
the seven virtues are discussed in there in a very meaningful way and very tangible way. It's immediately applicable. I think that just lends so much opportunity to doing that self examination. Like you said, like, how can I
Mhm.
grow just a little bit in each one every day? And it sounds like, I think you might have said this in one of your previous episodes, but I similarly do an examination every night before bed. I spend some time before bed looking back on my day at that macro level and just kind of zooming out. How did I do? How did I show up? Where was I impatient? Where was I frustrated? Where was I judgmental? And just holding myself accountable. So I was mentioning that the Catholic faith feels to me less judgmental, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that there isn't accountability. It's like, but
Mm.
there's a trust in each of us as individuals to hold ourselves accountable. And I just think that's such a beautiful thing because I certainly am growing. I can see that. I can sense it, but it's not something that is being demanded of me. And I don't know about you and your kids, but mine don't respond too well when there's like demands put on them. I don't know if you have come across in the gifted and twice exceptional community, there's PDA, pervasive demand for autonomy or pathological demand avoidance. So we have some prickliness around demands. And so I think when you internalize where you are hoping to go and you're intrinsically oriented toward your highest aim, then you can constantly, this is where the name of my practice comes from, you can constantly train toward that. Like we are in constant training spiritually,
Mhm.
right? And if we're doing that, if we're putting in the work, then we're going to see the growth.
Yeah. It's interesting how you talked about demands because I think demands can come from our own voice too. I
Mhm.
had a group coaching call today, and I don't know how many times I heard the phrase, I have to or I should have. And those words alone can feel like pressure versus I could have, right? Like I could have
Yes.
done the dishes or I could have played with my kids. I chose to play with my kids, and I don't need to beat myself up about the dirty dishes because I made a choice and I had freedom in that choice, right? So it's not like
Right.
I should have been able to get the dishes and everything else done. No, you made a choice there and that's okay. And there's freedom in that and there's beauty. But also, there's this opposite. If the voice in our head is that I have to, of the pressure of someone else telling us we have to, we might choose to go against that just out of our own human nature and the way that we are created. And I'm curious your perspective on this because I think that growth and virtue and our choices is very rooted in our habits. And when we start to shift certain habits, that can help us to grow in virtue. So, for example, one habit I am working on right now is not reading in my bed because it has grown from something that was okay and healthy and a good level to now I am reading super late into the night and I'm not sleeping well. And so I'm like separating. I will not read in my bed. I will only sleep in my bed. But habit changes can be difficult. What are things that you do to help shift habits?
Well, I think start really small. I mean, the first one that comes to mind is when I became a coach, a lot of things opened up. So just the practice of self inquiry in a less judgmental way allowed me over the course of about a year to re-engage with the Catholic faith and go back to reconciliation, meet with the priest, and then start going back to mass again after about 8 years of very off and on while we were moving and while we were doing the travel sport life, traveling around for
Mhm.
hockey. We really fell away from the faith, regrettably, terribly regrettably. But as I was re-engaging with the faith, I wanted to have morning devotions more a part of my life. I've seen my dad practice morning devotions every single morning with Our Daily Bread, the little pamphlet, and his
Mhm.
sliced banana and his granola and his orange juice, and he's just very disciplined about it. And in my mind, I was thinking, that's something that would probably be good for me, but how to get there? And again, that demand thing, that should thing, that
Mhm.
created a little bit of friction. So I just started with, honestly, what do I carry around with me all the time? Well, it's the phone, of course. So what is on the phone?
Mhm.
Well, you can find the Bible on the phone. And so I can carry this little thing. I don't have to switch to anything different. I can use the phone to begin doing daily devotions. And what are some of my routines in the morning? Like, how can I fit that into my morning? Just stack it on something that already
Mhm.
exists. Just literally take 5 minutes with something that already exists. So I just started there with very simple moves to just stack things that were handy and part of my life already. Regrettably, the phone is part of my life. That has grown over the course of 2 years to now the Catholic Adventure Bible. I read the physical Bible. I just like having a physical Bible now. I
Mhm.
like separating that time out physically and tangibly with my experience in this world. It's not on the phone, it's with the Bible. It has a different
Mhm.
physical sensation. And setting aside time to read. And then I do actually record in a journal in my phone some reflections on the scripture that I've just read. I try to align it with my current experience in this time that I am, in this moment that I am, my struggles. And then I actually incorporate a few pictures from the day before and reflect on my blessings. And so who knows where all of that will lead, but at the very least, it's causing me to be conscious and take time 15 to 20 to 30 minutes is typically what it is in the morning to orient my day around his word and doing my best. It's not always perfect. It's not always terribly insightful or substantive, but it's a wonderful practice because if you just stick with it, you are allowing God to speak to you through his word. You're inviting him in and you're doing your best to do that. And as
Mhm.
I grow, I will do better and better. I've already seen it in 3 years, but it's a natural desire. It's not like a pressure I should, but it's a natural thirst for more.
Mhm.
And so I would just encourage anybody who's just beginning on this journey or just coming back to the faith to try to drop all the the voices in your head that are placing demands and shoulds and judgment and performance and I'm not there yet, or my way isn't good, or somebody else does it. Just drop all of that, all of it, and start with what you feel drawn toward. It could be anything. The Hallow app. Maybe you just can't put your phone down
Yeah.
and switch to the Hallow app. You have choice over which apps you use. So maybe do the Hallow app before the Instagram app. I don't know where a person would start, but just give yourself the grace to think about what is a starting point that I feel drawn toward.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that are standing out from what you said. First, what am I already doing? So I think of my own life, right? Trying to fit in time to work out during the day is a more difficult season right now, right? But something I'm already doing is I'm often cooking. And it is not difficult to do a set of squats while I'm cooking or do some push ups, right? Is it the most conventional place? No, but at least it's something. And then once I'm doing that, usually I'm like, oh, I'm more motivated to work out later in the day than if I just don't do anything at all, right? So starting somewhere and looking at what we're already doing. A couple of other things that I think are important to note here is asking ourselves, what are my natural distractions that are keeping me from this habit? So you mentioned the phone. I can't pray with my phone because if there's a notification that pops up, I have to stop and read it. My brain cannot ignore it. And so I just know being on my phone for any type of prayer is not good prayer for me. I have to be completely separated from it. So I think that that's something to consider. And then the other thing is when we're making changes, and this recently came up with someone I was talking to, I kept hearing like, well, I just need to get up earlier, right? This is a really common thing when we're talking about integrating prayer. I just need to get up earlier. Well, if you just need to get up earlier and that's all there was to it, you would already be getting up earlier. Let's just face it. If it was that simple, it would already be happening. So let's just look at maybe at your bedtime. And is it actually possible? Is it even possible for you to go to bed earlier? If you have kids at home and you're in a season of life where, I was at a baseball game and I got home at 10 o'clock last night, let's say. Was it possible for me to go to bed earlier? No, it wasn't possible for me to go to bed earlier than I did. I went to bed as soon as I could. So we have to ask ourselves those questions as if the habits that we are trying to integrate are realistic for right now. And if
Right.
they're not, then okay, let's rethink. Again, go back to that question, what am I already doing? What is possible? I might want 30 minutes of prayer. Like I hear that and the comparison is in my head. Well, if this mom can do it, why can't I do it? But for your season, maybe you start with 2 minutes of prayer in the morning. And you just say, thank you, God, for this day before your feet hit the ground. And that's what you're capable of in that moment. And then let God take it from there.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. In fact, you reminded me that I don't know if you've run into the positive intelligence program, but I did get trained in that for a little while. And they have an app and they have just like very quick 1 or 2 minute little orientations for the day. And
Hmm.
and that kind of got me thinking, you know what? That is actually helpful to boil it down to something really small that I can just remember during the day. And so that's, I think, one impetus for people to take your suggestion up and then just do literally, if it's only 2 or 3 minutes, it's a great way to just orient toward your highest aim. And what is your highest aim, really? I think we get so bogged down in the logistics and the minutia, we forget. I don't know about you, but as a mother of young people, I am constantly trying to zoom back out from the logistics that cause conflict and consternation in the home, zoom way back out to what are we really working on here? Like, what is our purpose here as parents? I know that sounds maybe a very big question, but I try to remember that every day. And then I just feel this greater sense of patience with the little things because we're really working on something much, much bigger. And that comes to our relationship. Like right now, estrangement is a massive problem. Estrangement, I don't know if you've been following this at all, but young adults and their parents just going no contact, people within friendships disagreeing and going no contact. So for me as a parent, I never want that to happen with my kids. And they're almost out the door. They're 18 and 21. But the parents of younger kids have time to really be thinking about how are we living our lives as parents and what's really meaningful, important to us. Yes, all of these things about how are you going to feed yourself and pay your bills, and education plays a role in that, right? And learning to discern what your vocation might be, your calling. But us as families, like the most important thing is my relationship with my children. And that hit me like a brick between my eyes when my older son and I were going through all of the challenges that we were just trying to get him through high school. He did not believe he even needed a high school diploma or even a GED to do what he wants to do. And it turns out he's right. 5 years later, he's right. He didn't actually need it. But at the time, I was thinking, what in the world are you talking about? But then I looked at him as he walked through the door. I remember sitting in my car. We were driving an old yellow Xterra stick shift. And so both my boys have learned how to drive a stick shift. So he would drive over and then we would swap places and he would walk in the door. I remember looking at him as he walked in the door. I looked at his back as he was walking through those doors of that school. And I was thinking, the most important thing, I'll get emotional here. The most important thing is my relationship. It's not his grades. It's nothing else related to this building, this place, or anything. It's my relationship with him. The rest of it will sort itself out. And so I think sometimes like we busy parents just get completely lost in the weeds, perhaps,
Mhm.
about what it is that we're working on. But our families are the domestic church. Like this is how we are living out and showing our young people God's love for us. Like, and how are we showing that? How am I conducting myself? Am I really showing them what it means to be loved unconditionally?
Yeah. Estrangement, I think we talked about this the last time we met, and I agree. It's something that's very prominent in some of the prayer groups that I'm in, that people bring this, and I'm starting to see it in some of my own family that is very near and dear to me. And it's so difficult to watch. I can't imagine what it is like to be in it. But like you said, we get distracted by the little things. I think that's a tactic of the enemy, right? Again,
Yeah.
the have to, the shoulds. But are our children going to remember if there were dirty dishes in the sink, or are they going to remember the time that you took to help them put together the Lego? And I'm not saying that we abandon all of our household duties, because obviously we want to have clean and safe places for our children. And it is good for them to learn how to do chores and do different things. And we all have different parenting styles. But when I start to beat myself up for my quote unquote messy house, I just have to remind myself this is the parenting choice that I have chosen. And there are other parents who do it differently. They prioritize different things, and that is great, but I don't have to beat myself up for the way that I'm doing it, because this is what I feel like my kids need from me, and this is what I want out of my relationship with them. Hey, friend, I just want to pause for a second and say, first of all, thank you so much for being here. I know a lot of you listening are carrying so much, and you probably feel a little mentally scattered and stretched thin, or like you just can't ever quite do enough. And I want you to know that I see you and I understand, and there's nothing wrong with you. Sometimes all we need is a little space to breathe and to pray and to have someone listen so that we can get clear. And that is the biggest thing that I hear from clients when we are done meeting, is that they feel lighter. They feel like they have a path forward. They feel more confident. And I just want to invite you to a free confidence and clarity call. There is absolutely no pressure. There's no obligation. I'm not going to sell you on anything. It's just a simple conversation, because I want you to experience what that is like to have a safe space where you can be vulnerable and you can be seen. So if that's something you're interested in, just click the link in the show notes and together we can talk through whatever's feeling heavy right now, because we all deserve the chance to have the peace that God gives us. And sometimes we just need someone to help us see how to better protect that.
Yeah, so true. And I think that discernment is important because it evolves over time as your children grow, as their needs change, as you learn more about them. And we also begin to realize as parents, like, there's a human being, especially as they get older, there's a whole human being in there with an interior life that I actually don't really know through and through. When they're little, you kind of feel like you watch them and they're very expressive and you can kind of sense what's fun for them and what they're thinking. And they might draw things and they might share things with you. As they get older, at least in my family, my young people are very private and I read between the lines quite a lot. And I appreciate more and more that they have a whole interior life that is a mystery to me. And if I approach my relationship with them with the greater awareness of that mystery, then I'm less presumptive about what I'm asking them to do or how I'm going to go about doing it. And I'm going to bring the horse in. You knew I would. But each horse is different too. And the way you enter the stall and talk to the horse can really change your interaction with that horse. I mean, it's just unbelievable, Kylie, how perceptive they are. And so if horses are that perceptive, how much more so are my young men about how I approach them, just even without saying a word? What is the energy I'm bringing into my existence with them, my experience with them, even before I use any words, right? The look on the face, the taking the time to breathe in between retorts, right?
Yeah, this is something that I know I spend a lot of my coaching sessions on is, okay, we can't change our circumstances, right? There are certain circumstances that we cannot change. But your husband is the way that your husband is, and you can't control him. But how do you want to show up? How do you want to show up in that situation? And how can we work on that? Or we look at, okay, you keep thinking this thought, whether it's true or untrue, right? This thought keeps going through your mind and you're giving it a lot of airtime. You're giving it a lot of attention. And when you're thinking that thought, what are the ways that you're showing up to your situation? And a lot of times it's like, well, I'm avoiding doing certain things or I'm withdrawing, I'm holding back, I'm not really telling the person that I'm with or communicating how I feel because I don't want to make them upset. And we're not being our true and authentic selves. And so we look at how do we work through that? Are these true thoughts that we want to give airtime? Is this how the Lord sees me? Are these things that are drawing me closer to the Lord? And then we can move from there. And the horse example is so great because if you show up and you sit on a horse and you're stiff as a board, right? They're like, oh, something's going on here.
Yes, this just happened to me the other day. And I'm not the most relaxed individual. I'm pretty high energy. And so my trainer was like, you need to relax or she's going to keep going hard toward, and we're jumping on this spicy chestnut mare. And so I really need to relax, but it's hard to relax on a horse that's racing toward a jump. I mean, like, that's just a little difficult for me to do. But honestly, you really can. You can in the moment relax, and relax doesn't mean drop your standards, right? Relax doesn't mean change your belief system. Relax doesn't mean giving up, being lame. Being lame is in my
Mhm.
mind like something that a no-go zone. Remember, Krugs don't quit. So
Yeah.
never do I want to be lame. But I will say that relaxing how you approach another person and allowing them to have the dignity of their own free will, their own autonomy, their own agency, that is so important to my people and my family. And just about everybody I've ever worked with wants to feel like they have choice in the matter. So if we approach conversations with a respect that the other person has choice, we have choice, then you're a math person, you would understand this. If you have a system of equations and one variable is changed, then it does influence all the others. You mentioned a lot of your coaching conversations around control, and a person wants something to change, but how often do you bring it back to, right? We can't control the circumstances. We can't control the other people. We can't control the conditions you're in, but you can control how you respond. And when you change your one variable, the system of equations necessarily has to adjust to that and respond to that. So people may feel very disempowered about how nothing's ever going to change. Like in my practice, people can feel very disillusioned, disheartened, have some despair and hopelessness until they realize that they actually can do some things and things can change and things do change once they begin to respond differently.
Yeah, it's that phrase. We don't go to prayer for God to change our circumstances. We go to prayer to change us, right? It changes our lens. It changes our perception of the circumstances around us, which we see the beauty of that through the lives of the saints. St. Paul is in prison and he's prepared the martyrs. You know, there's a sense of peace and calm that comes about them, not because their circumstances have changed or their circumstances are great. It's because they understand the presence of the Lord there with them and that they're open to receiving the graces that he gives them. And this conversation, I think, is so important. I recently had a guest on, Dee Arson, and she talked about what's going on in our relationships is often indicative or a reflection of what's going on in ourselves and our interior lives. So, in order for us to show up different to the people around us, to change that variable, we have to do a lot of that first interior work. And I know you have a history of doing some interior work, the way that you saw yourself, and then the actions that resulted as the way that you saw yourself changed the way that you showed up in the world. I don't know how much you want to share, but if you want to give a little backstory on some of that and kind of the image that you had of yourself and how that began to shift.
Yeah, I'll try to put it succinctly. I think I've already described I was the good student, the one who doesn't get the demerit, follow all the rules. And really, my logic, I think, was show up as perfect as you can, and then love will be there for you. And although I know logically that is not true, and no one ever said that to me, it's just how I interpreted the world is try to be the best you can, and then you'll be loved and acceptable and found sufficient. And over time, that just became such an ingrained practice, and it led to some behaviors and some responses that were not so good for me. In going through difficult times, I would try to figure out ways to ensure that I was seen, going through a move midway through high school, having to sell our horses, which I had raised from birth. That was a very, very difficult time. I experienced going through an eating disorder and had severe anorexia for about 2 years. And since that time, anybody who's gone through that will spend probably most of the rest of their life trying to discern what it was that was really going on, at least the folks I've talked to. Once you're healed from it, it's still a question mark in your mind about what was actually happening there. Like, why did I actually do that? But a couple of things that I have learned in reflecting back on my own life is one of them is it's simple biology. By sticking to a plan and a very rigid plan, dopamine is released. And so
Mm.
that's an interesting finding. We all need dopamine. It's the chemical that in our brains continues us to keep moving toward a goal. So that's just one aspect of it. But another aspect of it is in many books that I had read, and my mom tells me now that anorexia was like in the water and in the air when I was growing up in the late 80s. I wasn't aware of that. I can't recall that. I can't recall seeing hyper thin people and having that influence my mind. I honestly don't think that it was like social contagion for me. I was pretty clueless from a pop culture standpoint, but it was. And shortly after that was bipolar. So things go in fads. I don't think that was a factor. I was really, I think, and it wasn't even control. A lot of people chalk it up to control. I think it had more to do with seeing a thin person can, I guess, solicit support and comfort and caretaking by looking small. In all of the movies and things that the heroine is diminutive and somebody comes in to rescue the heroine or the protagonist female. And so looking small is a way to say, hey, I need some help, but in a nonverbal way. And for me, I think that was salient because in my family, resilience was just something that was kind of baked into all of us. You fall off the horse, you get up again. We're just very resilient people. And I think that's a good trait. But at the same time, I don't think that I was really conscious of the things that I was struggling with internally. I was very good at coping, moving and changing groups of friends and trying a new sport, shifting from horses to soccer, even though I was bad at that. I started a crew team at my high school. I took all kinds of classes and got A's in all of them and threw myself into hard work and performance. And a lot of the folks with anorexia did the same thing. It's like, gosh, you're feeding yourself too little and you're hyper performing. Like, how does that work? Like, you're just
Mhm.
running on empty, but you're at the same time overachieving anything that a reasonable person would have thought was possible while being fully nourished and fed. It's just
Mhm.
crazy how a person can go into that mode, but I did. And in retrospect, I realized that it's just an example of my conditional logic. If X, then Y. If I look thin, then someone will come and see me, and I won't have to use words to express feelings that might have been under there underlying it all. So I don't know if that really answers your question. I don't remember the question, frankly, at this point.
That's okay. I told you at the beginning we're going to let the Holy Spirit take us
Right,
where the Holy Spirit
right.
wants to take us. I'm curious, how did you see yourself during that stage when you were hyperachieving, you were over excelling? Did you see yourself as that type of person that was hyperachieving, or did you see yourself as like, this is the expectation, this is what people do or should be doing?
Yeah, it's just like, it's what I did. It was a way of having purpose and meaning. I wasn't
Mhm.
the person in high school who had a lot of boyfriends knocking on my door. When they did call, they were looking for my notes.
Mm.
So it was just part of my identity. And I think that's important for people, parents, young people to consider is like your identity is being crafted all the time, conscious or not. We are, you've talked about your actions and your habits, right? Are so
Mhm.
important. I think that was just became my habit. It became who I was. And it was just a way of having meaning in my days. And also a genuine desire to fully, fully understand things, to really understand. Also a fear of failure. If I ask all those questions, and I can figure out if I got a 98 on my bio test, if I can figure out why I missed 2 points, then that won't come to bite me later, 2 years later, because I missed some stupid part of the Krebs cycle that I didn't fully understand. So it was that perfectionism was driving that to just offer some security because I didn't have a self concept that I was a smart person. I just thought I struggled. I worked really hard. I worked all the time. I would sit on my front steps and study that big fat biology book. And in my mind, other people didn't have to do that. They didn't have to work as hard to understand things. I didn't know. That was just my own judgment. I had no data for that. That was just my perception. I found out later in grad school that I was driving one of my professors crazy because I would come up and ask questions. I would get, I don't know, an 80 something on an epidemiology exam. And I would go up and again want to understand, what did I miss? What did I miss? Because it's going to bite me in the butt later. And I don't want to end up getting a 70 at the end of the semester. And basically, she told me 20 years later that the people sitting behind me were failing. And I had the top marks in the class. I had no idea, or something like that. I was completely fine. And she was basically thinking, like, what are you doing at my desk asking me these questions? So we just never know what is going on around us. We are driving ourselves. And I don't necessarily think this is a bad thing. I know that you have a lot of high performers, high achievers who listen to your pod. And I don't necessarily think that's bad. I think excellence is not a bad thing to strive for. I mean, I think God gave us a beautiful brain, right? And he gave us energy. And if we want to understand his creation deeply, go for it. But also think about, okay, is there a vice kind of underlying this? Like what vice might be showing up here? And I'm so thankful that my husband he's basically my spiritual director. He has introduced me to the notion that pride is everywhere. Like basically, if you're in doubt about what vice you have, just go for pride because it's
Yeah.
more than likely there.
Amen. I think this is so important, right? We have this distortion of self and we cannot see ourselves clearly. And I'm so glad that you mentioned striving for excellence is a beautiful thing, right? God instilled this in us. And where it can become sinful is if we are placing our worth in that performance, in that excellence. Striving for excellence to have good, right? We want to have high expectations and standards, but again, it can be very distorted. And talking about the grades, I would not have seen this in myself in school, but I remember teaching middle school. I think it was a middle school class. I had a student who got a 99 and she was so upset and she was in tears. And I've had this happen multiple times where parents would tell me my kid is coming home crying from a class and this kid has a 98 or a 99 in my class. I'm like, what is going on? They just have so much pressure on themselves to be perfect, right? They want the 100. And if it's not there, then it feels like something in them is wrong, right? I didn't get it. And there's all this self condemnation. And
Mhm.
I see myself like that sometimes still, but of much more so back then. We just can't see the full picture. Like you said, you didn't realize everyone else is failing. An 80 is great in that
Right.
particular situation, but we don't have the full picture. And that's where so often we need someone else to just help us take a step back and just get the bigger view, the bigger lens of what is really going on. And that's why I think God created us for community. He created us
Mhm.
for relationship because we can't fully excel on our own. And to help give us perspective so that we can keep things properly ordered. And go back to that question that you said earlier. I don't remember exactly how you phrased it, but it's essentially like, what is my highest aim? What is the biggest purpose here? Is the purpose to have a 100%, or is the purpose to learn so that I can use this God given gift and the brain that the Lord has given me for his glory?
Right.
So just always going back to that question, like, what is my highest aim? Or I always say, what is my deepest desire? When I can take a step back and say, okay, the bigger desire is to have a healthy relationship with my kids versus over having a clean home or whatever it is. It just changes the way that we show up and the way that we talk to ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. And being mindful that kids, even in the same family with the same parents, can have very different outward expressions of these sorts of interior thoughts about their worth. One child can put themselves under tremendous pressure to perform. And they can do that because they feel like, I don't want to let the pressure off because then I will just, it's very binary thinking. Then I'll just slack or I won't amount to anything or I won't have the freedom that I desire. And it's very interesting if you don't have the kind of relationship with your children where you can really be honest about that and really talk to them about it. Like if they see you as a taskmaster and not as somebody they can confide in, then it can be really challenging to help them work through that. And then once they leave home or they're in college and they just have a complete meltdown, then it's so tragic. If we could just build into our parenting for so many years, and I say this now looking backwards, if we can build into more of our conversations and appreciation for the process and the struggle and understanding why we're making certain decisions that we're making, that metacognition that we as coaches are
Mhm.
like so fluent in, that's not something that people do a lot of. It's the air we breathe now that we're coaches, having an awareness of self and the decisions we're making. But if we can help parents do that and create a safe place in the home to have that level of conversation or that kind of detail conversation around decisions that are made, no judgment, but just, hey, let's look at this without making a person feel shame or guilt, but just let's look at what went into this decision or lack of decision or inaction. What is actually going on here? So often I know I was caught up in the process and looking for all of these process measures on the way to an outcome because I'm a quality improvement person. I love quality
Mhm.
improvement. And if we can just measure the process measures are going to lead to the outcome. I can't tell you how many vending machine metrics I had set up to get one of my children through school to hand in those assignments, right? To just like, how do I reduce the amount of stress and pressure on me as a mother to find out what levers to pull with him to get him to do the thing? Because my poor husband would come home and be like, what is happening? Why are there so many missing assignments? Well, we could have benefited from me going through coaching training maybe earlier. So we could have had some really patient, constructive conversations about what's working and what isn't. But in the moment, that's not where we were. That just wasn't how we were functioning in that moment. There was so much pressure on me as the mother and frustration in the family. And I just really feel for all those mothers out there who are trying to shepherd their children through school, through a school system that, very often a lot of the kids don't really find value in what they're doing day to day. They are not connecting the dots. And truly they're right. There is not exactly a lot of value oftentimes in what they're doing. And parents don't have the option always to homeschool or hybrid school or do something really funky and creative.
Mhm.
They've got to make the best of what they are presented with. So I guess I would just encourage parents to keep thinking about how do we ask some open ended questions, not too many, or the kids will be like, I know you're trying a coaching question on me. And it can be really difficult for them to dig deep, but just be curious when we're entering a moment of conflict, just to try to remember to be curious about what could actually be happening under here and what is actually motivating me as a parent to be so aggressive on whatever point it is that I'm pushing. What is it? Is there virtue in that? Or is there maybe a vice in that? Is there pride in that? Is my own self worth tied up in how my kids are doing?
Mm.
You know?
I think that's a huge one. Our own self-worth being tied up in how our kids are performing or maybe quote unquote not performing to the
Right?
expected standard. And I'm curious for someone who hasn't been through coach training, who maybe is having difficulty with their child. And I can only imagine how painful this is because as a teacher, I sat in on a lot of conferences and IEP meetings and all of those things. And I saw the parents who had just checked out and were like, whatever, my kid's on their own, they need to figure it out. I saw the parents who were in tears because they felt like they had tried everything and nothing was working. And they were still getting emails about how it was never worded this way but in their mind, it was like how awful my kid is, right? Like my kid can't sit still. My kid can't listen. My kid is not turning in their homework, all these things, right? And then again, they start to feel like I'm a bad parent or my kid's a bad student. And then there's also the teacher side of I want to help this kid. I want to love this kid, but I also have a room of 20 other kids. And if this one is throwing something, I can't give them the one on one attention that they need or whatever the situation is. And so this is one of those times where it feels like the circumstances are so fixed. Well, what can I do different? So I heard you say, be curious, ask open ended questions. I also kind of reading between the lines here, but not having a preconceived answer of how to fix it, but maybe just going into it with an open mind of, okay, we're just going to be curious together and just
Yes.
see what's going on.
Yes, I would add to that. I think this comes from me raising a very young horse, a foal, who was born at our house to being ridden when he was 4. I did that when I was 12, and it was just such a unique and profound experience. What went into that, I had no knowledge. I had never been trained to do that before. I was just a 12-year-old girl with a foal in a stall. and a desire to gentle him and be able to ride him one day. And what made that possible is simply observation, careful observation, trying something, experimenting something, continuing to work toward a goal and being flexible, being nimble, having a sense of humor, accepting setbacks. Everything that foal taught me has really helped me in parenting because honestly, this may sound bad, but I did not read parenting books. I read some of the preconception books, What to Expect When You're Expecting, and it's 500 pages. And when my children were first born, I was like, oh my goodness, like I'm not even sleeping. There's no way I can read a parenting book. I did create the spreadsheet for feeding and all the milestones. I'm guilty of that. But after that, I didn't read any parenting books. And I'm glad I didn't, to be honest, because it can make you really neurotic about when is my child learning to talk. There's an 18-month window that's pretty normal, like from like what, younger than 1 to or
Mhm.
older than 2. I mean, there's a very wide range of a child learning to be verbal. And if your child is not progressing according to the milestones, and the CDC keeps changing it anyway. Interestingly, they changed it after the pandemic when I think masks might have interfered with some language development stuff and not being able to read lips. But that tangent aside, reading parenting books can make you really second guess yourself. And I think it can lead to creating some self-fulfilling prophecies and some fables about what you think your children will or won't do, or maybe even start to diagnose them yourself and label them, which then can create some expectations around what's possible for them and even looking for problems when maybe there aren't actually problems. I mean, the human behavior is so fascinating and so highly variable that we can look at one thing as a strength or a deficit. The very same behavior could be both. You mentioned a child wiggling around and not sitting still. That could be looked at as a deficit and a major problem to solve and possibly even medicate. Or you could look at that as the person is highly aware, very energetic, maybe has already figured out the math problem or whatever it is on the board and is eager to get going on to something else. So I think with everything in life, look at it from a strengths perspective, right? So
Mhm.
whatever it is that's bugging you, and we coaches tend to look at it as, okay, is there a value of yours that is not being honored, right? If there's something that's very frustrating, maybe they're not respecting you. If your child is misbehaving or something, or they're not respecting somebody else, okay, well, that might be a good conversation to have and create some awareness for the child around, hey, in this setting, when you did that, what do you think the other person felt? Or what do you think they experienced?
Mhm.
Okay. What could be different next time? And just keep developing in the child their own internal sort of dialogue around, okay, what am I doing? Right. And
Mhm.
what did I actually want to have happen? Because they're never really too young to develop that sort of awareness. And I think what's challenging right now, I mean, obviously I'm older. And so when my children were very young, we didn't even have cell phones. Exactly. I mean, we did, but not really. Now young children have access to all kinds of devices. And unfortunately, the easy path is to give them access to devices to keep them busy versus observing human interactions. So it used to be like when you're waiting in the dentist office or whatever, the child is sitting there with you and observing everything that's going on around them. Now, if you go about your everyday activities to the store, or to the doctor's office or whatever, the post office, I avoid that at all costs. But like you're going about and you're going to motor vehicles, whatever you're doing, your daily activities. Now, if we are just entertaining our children constantly and they're not observing the world around them, then they don't have a chance to really understand human interactions, cause and effect. And they don't have a chance to discern for themselves, how do I want to behave? What would I think in that situation? So I think personally, you can put parenting books aside and just really immerse yourself in observing what's happening and have a playful spirit and be curious and ask your child to be curious. Ask them to do more thinking and problem solving on their own versus just trying to get them to be quiet. Something that we always think while we're in mass is the poor parents sitting in front of us with the squirming kids. We just want those young parents out there to not worry about it. When we were bringing our young kids to mass, we were very conscious about how much noise they were making and how distracting they were being. And are they dressed in their little khakis with their collars, like not sticking out all over the place? And I wanted to sit in the front because I knew if our kids sat in the front, they would be able to see things better and they'd be more engaged in the mass. But at the same time, if you sit in front, you're a spectacle, right? You and I both love to sit in the front of the classrooms. But in mass, the young families don't generally do that because they don't want everybody probably watching them. But I would say go sit in the front, let your child be engaged, and just allow them to be. No one's sitting there judging you. Well, maybe some are, but does that really matter? There are parents like my husband and I sitting behind you who are praying for you and blessing you in our spirits and just thinking you are wonderful for bringing your small children to mass. So just enjoy them there. Do your best. Yes, teach them to be respectful. Teach them that there's a time and a place, and situational awareness is important. But I've gone way on a tangent here. But just take some of that pressure off because you're doing what you're meant to do. You're bringing your family to mass. You're doing the best you can. Just keep doing the best you can and it will take care of itself. Don't beat yourself up too much.
Amen. Stop beating yourself up. This is the difference between my brain and my husband's brain. I'm like, I want to sit in the front. I don't want to see people because one, I get distracted, and two, then I'm comparing myself to what's going on in their life.
Too.
Whereas my husband's like, let's sit in the back with the kids because I don't want anyone to judge us. But I'm like, yeah, but then they're turning around looking at you. You can see everybody else.
Yes.
I don't want that. Put me in the front. Put me in the front. So we've gradually worked our way up. My husband's not Catholic, so I don't think we'll ever be in the front. Maybe someday. But we're much closer than we used to be. And it's been really great for my kids to be up there closer. Granted, they're older now. And when they were babies, that would have been more challenging. But I just think it's interesting the way that our brains work. And I love that you said, just go sit in the front. You've got more people praying for you, I think, because they see you. It's so true. Or you're giving them a laugh, right? It's so uplifting. When someone else's kid misbehaves, most of the time, at least for me, I'm not mad. I'm the person that giggles. And I remember my little brother being at mass, and he used to have those squishy fishing worms. He loved to play with those and chucking one 6 rows back, right? Those are the memories that come to me when I see little kids being kids at mass. And I too never read any parenting books. The number one things that I think have been my saving grace is remembering reason is not developed until about approximately the age of 7. That's why First Communion is usually around that age. So you can try to reason with your kids all you want when they're little, but they're not going to be able to do that because psychologically they haven't developed that yet. And 2, the brain stem is not fully developed until I believe it's age 25. So your kids are going to make dumb decisions. You made dumb decisions and it's okay. You survived and you're here, and that can take away a lot of the anger. So like you said, observe and be curious. When you're curious, you can't be angry. You can't be frustrated.
Yeah, and connection, right? Just keep connection, keep asking questions. Let that curiosity lead you into a connection with the child in a conversation.
Yeah. And I think with your children, but also with yourself. Just like we said earlier, when that self-condemnation, like be curious, where is that coming from? What is that
Right.
stemming from? Getting closer to that root. Allie, this has been so helpful. Before I get to my final question, where can people connect with you?
Oh, sure. Trainmyaim.com. So train like training, my aim. And you can email me at Allie@trainmyaim.com. It's ALLI for anyone listening.
Wonderful. I will put that in the show notes. And Allie, I always close out guest episodes by asking if you have a favorite prayer tip or scripture verse that you would like to share with everyone listening.
I do. I am just looking for it.
That's all right. Take your time.
I think it's Isaiah 46:3.
Well, while you are searching, for everyone listening, thank you for your continued support of the podcast. If you have been blessed by this, I encourage you, if you are able to, prayerfully consider donating. It is not free to put these out every week. And so donations to the Persistence and Prayer podcast are greatly appreciated. You can find the link in the show notes.
Well done, Kylie. You are just an exceptional host, and I just appreciate you so much. I did find it. So it's Isaiah 46:3. Listen to me, O house of Jacob, and all the remnant of the house of Israel. We have been born by me from your birth, carried from the womb. Even to your old age, I am he, and to gray hairs, I will carry you. I have made, and I will bear. I will carry, and will save. And the gray hairs just meant a lot to me, and just knowing that he is there. It's carried from the womb, even to old age. He is there.
The gray hair was exactly the part that stood out to me too.
Yes. My kids are like, how do you have this much hair falling out? How are you not bald yet?
Oh my
So
goodness.
that really resonated.
I've been in this phase. So my dad went completely gray in his 20s, and I have not got my hair done in a very long time. And my daughter's like, Mom, you should probably go get your hair done. You're starting to look old. And I was just like, well, she's like, well, you're beautiful, but just, you look a lot older. And Mimi, her hair doesn't even have that much gray. I'm like, yes, you're right, because your grandma dyes her hair.
I don't know, Kylie. I think you're beautiful, and God gives us all of these things, right? To allow ourselves to just question, like, why is that important even? I used to dye my hair too. And then I stopped. I was like, why is that even important? Is it back to that whole anorexia thing and looking a
Mhm.
certain way and self-worth, right?
Yeah.
You know what? I think I'm comfortable exactly how he made me. And I'm thankful for all of the challenges. I'm thankful for all the athletics related injuries that I have to just teach me how he is carrying me when I can't carry myself in the way that I'm accustomed to. It teaches us about identity. Our identity is in him, right? So it's just, yeah, these are simple little things and silly little things, and people can choose what they want to choose. But for me, because I feel like I'm a baby Catholic once again, it's just allowing me to think about, okay, what's really important? What is he teaching you?
Mhm.
Yeah. Thank you for this time, Kylie.
Just awareness. Yeah, Ellie, thank you
Right.
so much. You are such a blessing. I've enjoyed all of my conversations with you, and this has been so wonderful. So thank you for giving your time. I will continue to pray for you and all of those who you are working with. You're doing wonderful work. Beautiful souls, thank you again for journeying with me. If you have been blessed by this episode, it would mean the world to me if you would leave a review. Be sure to screenshot it, share it on your social media stories, and don't forget to tag me on Instagram or Facebook at Kylie M. Hine. Stay persistent in prayer, protect your peace, and as always, share the light of Christ with everyone around you.